35 years ago, on December 6th, 1989, I was a young 8-year-old girl waiting for my father to come home for supper. It was the days before cell phones, and we didn't know where he was. And we waited around the dinner table, worrying and wondering. It turned out that he was at École Polytechnique that night, and he witnessed ambulances waiting to take the bodies of 14 young women who were brutally murdered in their classroom. He explained all this to my mother, I think not realizing that I was listening. And when I asked why these women had been shot, I don't think he knew what to say other than because they were women. Canadians of my generation remember where they were on December 6th, 1989. Et demain, comme à chaque année, je me joindrai à ma communauté en deuil à Outremont sur le Mont-Royal avec les familles et les survivantes du massacre de l'École Polytechnique. Je tiens tout particulièrement à exprimer ma profonde gratitude à Nathalie Provost de Police se souvient, ici présente, dont le courage et la détermination nous inspirent tous, à tous les jours. Also with me is Suzanne Zakour from the National Association of Women and the Law, who fights relentlessly in order to curb the scourge of gender-based violence in Canada. Professor Wendy Zukier is also here. She is the president of the Coalition for Gun Control and has spent a lifetime fighting in order to secure Canadians. Thank you all for joining us and supporting our government's announcement of today, which will be led by Minister LeBlanc, the Minister of Public Safety, Minister Blair, the Minister of National Defense, and Minister Duclos, Minister of Procurement and Lieutenant for Quebec. In 2015, we were elected by Canadians with a promise to get handguns and assault weapons off of our streets. We've banned 1,500 models of assault-style firearms, including the Ruger Mini 14, the gun used in the Polytechnique massacre, and at Portapique, the two worst mass shootings in the history of Canada. We have taken several other concrete measures since then, and today we are taking the next step forward. It is an honor to pass the microphone over to our Minister of Public Safety, Minister for Democratic Institutions, and Minister for Intergovernmental Affairs, Dominic LeBlanc.
Alors, merci beaucoup, Rachel. Bonjour à tous et à toutes. Merci d'être là aujourd'hui. Je suis désolé, évidemment, de ne pas être avec vous à Ottawa, mais je suis de retour au Nouveau-Brunswick pour des funérailles cet après-midi. Comme Rachel a dit, demain, nous allons marquer le 35e anniversaire du massacre survenu à l'École Polytechnique le soir du 6 décembre 1989. Ce chapitre extrêmement sombre de notre histoire collective a marqué à jamais toute une génération de Québécoises et de Québécois et de Canadiennes et de Canadiens. 35 ans plus tard, des survivantes de cette tragédie luttent sans relâche pour renforcer le contrôle des armes à feu. Nous avons l'honneur de les avoir parmi nous aujourd'hui. J'aimerais remercier moi aussi Nathalie Provost, la fondatrice du groupe Police se souvient, d'avoir fait le voyage de Montréal pour participer à cette annonce. J'aimerais également remercier les membres de la Coalition pour le contrôle des armes et l'Association nationale Femmes et Droits d'être parmi nous aujourd'hui. J'ai eu l'occasion au cours des derniers mois d'échanger avec Nathalie et Heidi de Police se souvient sur l'importance d'agir en matière de contrôle des armes à feu et personne ne peut rester indifférent devant la perspicacité, la franchise et la passion qu'elles apportent à la discussion, et je suis profondément inspiré par leur courage et leur dévouement. Nous avons le devoir d'agir afin de prévenir qu'une autre tragédie se produise. The best thing we can do to honor the memories of those we lost in mass shootings is to act on gun control and to restrict access to the very weapons used to commit these horrible crimes. Our goal is to ensure that no community, no family is devastated by mass shootings in Canada again. That's why today, as Rachel said, we're building on the historic advances we've made since 2015 by taking further action. Today, the government is adding a further 324 unique makes and models of assault-style firearms to the list of prohibited firearms in Canada. This prohibition takes effect immediately. This means these firearms can no longer be legally used, sold, or imported in Canada and can only be transferred or transported under extremely limited circumstances. Les 324 modèles d'armes à feu prohibées aujourd'hui, immédiatement, s'ajoutent aux 1500 modèles bannis en 2020 ayant des caractéristiques techniques similaires qui font en sorte qu'elles sont conçues pour les champs de bataille, pas pour aller à la chasse. Elles ont été identifiées à la suite d'une consultation robuste avec les experts de la GRC. Et je voudrais remercier le commissaire Mike Duhem et le sous-commissaire Brian Larkin qui est à Ottawa aujourd'hui et leurs équipes pour les conseils et l'appui important. The government has introduced an amnesty that is currently in force and expires on October 30th, 2025 to protect individuals who legally purchased these firearms prior to the ban. This amnesty period will protect these individuals from criminal liability as they take steps to come into compliance with the law. During the amnesty period, there is an exception to allow Indigenous peoples exercising a right under Section 35 of the Constitution, as well as those who use firearms for sustenance hunting, to continue to use their now prohibited firearms to hunt, if previously non-restricted, until a suitable replacement can be found. As with the previous list of firearms, these models will, of course, be part of the assault-style firearms compensation program. And to that end, I'm pleased to point out that the pilot program of Phase 1 of the gun buyback program is now underway. The program will be open for all businesses in the coming days. As part of that process, the Government of Canada has committed to the Ukrainian government to identify whether some of these guns could be donated to support the fight for democracy in Ukraine. My colleague Bill Blair will speak on this in a few moments. In addition to banning these guns, we're also taking action on the regulatory front. Next Friday, December 13th, we will table regulations to ensure that no firearm can come into Canada or be sold in Canada without first being approved by the RCMP. And no later than the end of January, we will table additional measures in Parliament to address the rates of gun violence in situations of gender-based and intimate partner violence. We will also introduce further regulations on red and yellow flag laws early this spring and regulations on large capacity magazines no later than March. De plus, nous allons réunir un panel d'experts pour appuyer le travail de la GRC, un panel d'experts qui comprendra évidemment des représentants autochtones, qui se penchera sur la classification des armes à feu qui ne font pas partie des modèles prohibés aujourd'hui. Ils nous reviendront avec leurs recommandations en début de l'année prochaine et nous allons prendre des mesures additionnelles pour resserrer davantage l'accès à ces armes. Notre gouvernement continuera à faire tout ce qui est en son pouvoir pour que le Canada ne connaisse plus jamais de fusillade de masse. Et avec ça, je vous remercie et Rachel, je vous retourne la parole.
Merci. À moi de remercier et de reconnaître que nous sommes évidemment accompagnés par le sous-commissaire Brian Larkin de la GRC, Deputy Commissioner Brian Larkin of the RCMP, who has worked tirelessly to get us to this day. We'll also be taking your questions at the end. It is now my distinct pleasure to welcome to the podium our Minister of National Defense, Bill Blair.
Thank you very much, Rochelle. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think this is a very important day, and I wanted to acknowledge Natalie, Suzanne, Wendy, and people I know who have worked so tirelessly on trying to make Canada a safer place for all of us. And as we mark a very important and solemn anniversary tomorrow, I hope it increases all of our collective resolve to continue to do what is required. As my colleague, Minister LeBlanc, has indicated, we've been working very closely with our friends in Ukraine to ensure that weapons that were intended to be used in combat could be made available to them. And since Russia's brutal and unjustified invasion of Ukraine, Canada has and continues to make every effort to support our Ukrainian allies in their fight to defend their territory, their sovereignty, their citizens, and to win this war. And since 2015, Canada has committed over $19 billion worth of aid and support to Ukraine, including $4.5 billion worth of lethal and non-lethal military equipment. The Ukraine security forces have been very clear about the resources, support, and equipment that they need most, and we have always listened to them and tailored our donations to best meet those needs. And just this past October, we reached out to the Ukrainians once again to see whether any of the weapons that are currently under Amnesty through Canada's assault-style firearms compensation program could be of any use to them in their fight against Russia. And they confirmed that indeed, some of the weapons that are part of the program would be suitable. And so I am pleased today in joining in this announcement to announce also that the Department of National Defense will begin working with the Canadian companies that have weapons that Ukraine needs and which are already eligible for the assault-style firearm compensation program in order to get these weapons out of Canada and into the hands of the Ukrainians. For companies that choose to participate in this initiative, the Government of Canada will pay them with the same amount, exactly the same amount for weapons donated to Ukraine as they would have paid them to participate in the existing compensation program as outlined by my colleague, Minister LeBlanc. Every bit of assistance that we can offer to the Ukrainians is one step towards their victory and a worthwhile investment of our collective time and efforts. Ukrainians are fighting not only for their sovereignty and freedom, but they're also fighting for the rules-based international order that has kept the world safe for nearly 80 years. And our support for Ukraine in this fight will be steadfast and committed. We will continue to support Ukraine with all of the help that we can to ensure that they have the resources and support that they need to win this war and to rebuild once the fighting stops. Thank you very much. Back to you, Rochelle.
Merci beaucoup. Et j'ai le plaisir de passer la parole maintenant à notre ministre des Services publics et de l'Approvisionnement, ainsi que notre lieutenant pour le Québec, Monsieur le ministre Jean-Yves Duclos.
Merci beaucoup, Rachel, et bonsoir à tous ceux et à toutes celles qui sont ici avec nous, tous ceux qui ont pris la peine, comme disait Dominique, de se joindre à nous pour cette annonce, alors que nous soulignons un jour important pour la sécurité de nos communautés et que nous mettons en lumière l'espoir et le travail acharné de tant de défenseurs de la lutte contre la violence par arme à feu. Le 6 décembre 1989, il y a de ça 35 ans demain, le Canada a été témoin de l'une des pires tueries de son histoire. Un tireur entra à l'École polytechnique de Montréal où il tuera 14 femmes et blessera 13 autres personnes. Et il y a 7 ans, le 29 janvier 2017, à Québec, dans ma circonscription, un homme armé a pris d'assaut le centre culturel islamique et a tué 6 fidèles musulmans et en a blessé 19 autres. Ce sont là 2 exemples parmi tant d'autres des effets dévastateurs de la violence armée sur nos communautés à travers le pays. Je tiens à saluer les survivantes, les survivants, les familles et amis des victimes et tous les militants sans lesquels l'annonce d'aujourd'hui ne serait pas possible. Certains d'entre eux et certaines d'entre eux sont parmi nous aujourd'hui. Nous sommes reconnaissants et reconnaissantes de votre détermination, de votre espoir, de votre persévérance visant à assumer ensemble notre responsabilité collective de restreindre davantage le nombre d'armes à feu dangereuses en circulation dans nos communautés. In Quebec and across the country, Canadians deserve to live in communities that are safe and free of gun violence. Weapons of war have no place in our communities. Aujourd'hui, nous annonçons que 324 marques et modèles uniques d'armes d'assaut additionnelles sont désormais interdits au Canada. Il s'agit de 104 nouvelles familles d'armes à feu et leurs déclinaisons. La GRC a pu identifier ces armes en utilisant le même critère inclus dans le décret de mai 2020 et qui se retrouve dans la définition technique que le Parlement a approuvée dans la loi C-21, soit des armes à feu semi-automatiques de style militaire avec une capacité de tir rapide soutenue. The ban of a further 324 unique makes and models was made possible by the RCMP using the criteria for the May 2020 order in Council and a new technical definition from Bill C-21, which define what is a prohibited firearm. The RCMP has a deep knowledge of firearms found in Canada, and they have the ability to determine which firearms are designed for military purposes and those that can be considered reasonable firearms for hunting. We should not be presented with a false choice that restricting war weapons is an assault on law-abiding, responsible gun owners and hunters. It is also our government's intent to table next week regulations that will ensure that all new makes and models of firearms reaching our country are properly accounted for by the RCMP in the firearms reference table. This means that the list of prohibited firearms will now be evergreen. In January 2025, the government will also table measures in the House of Commons to address the increasing rates of domestic violence and gender-based violence by enacting Section 6.1, Section 70.1, and Section 70.2 from Bill C-21. We will continue to work towards regulations on red and yellow flags this spring. Also, earlier in November, like our colleague Minister Leblanc mentioned earlier, we concluded a pilot with 4 businesses which resulted in the collection and destruction of the first prohibited firearms under the assault-style firearms compensation program. In the coming days, we will reach out to all firearms businesses in the country so that they can also participate in Phase 1 of the program. This means that we are one step closer to taking all assault-style weapons off our streets. I couldn't stress enough that assault weapons are just that, weapons of war which are making our communities unsafe. The prohibition of these firearms will also extend to keeping our borders secure and will help stop illegal smuggling of firearms into Canada. We have a responsibility to strengthen firearms legislation. We also have a responsibility to support intervention and prevention programs to stop gun and gang violence even before it starts. Whether it is targeted towards women, religious communities, or any other Canadian, there is no place for hate and violence in this country. Un Canadien tué par une arme à feu est un Canadien de trop. Merci. Thank you.
Merci, Ministre Duclos, and thank you to all cabinet ministers that are here today for your leadership, and indeed to the many leaders in our government that have fought for stronger gun control in Canada. And we are joined today by one of them, Pam Damoff, who has fought relentlessly for stronger gun control over the years that she has been a member of Parliament. It is now a distinct pleasure to welcome to the podium two incredible women. Je vous présente maintenant Suzanne Zacour de l'Association nationale des femmes en droit ainsi que Nathalie Provost de Police se souvient.
Good afternoon. My name is Suzanne Zacour. I'm the Director of Legal Affairs at the National Association of Women in the Law. For the past 50 years, NAL has been at the forefront of advocating for laws that promote women's safety, freedom, and equal rights. Last year, NAL founded the Women for Gun Control Coalition to advocate alongside 32 other women's rights organizations for strong measures in Bill C-21 to protect women from intimate partner gun violence. The data is clear. There is an epidemic of gender-based violence in Canada. Firearms are a serious risk factor in situations of domestic violence, especially for rural women. One has only to consider the recent femicides and familicides in provinces such as Nova Scotia, Ontario, and Manitoba this year to understand the importance of today's announcement. It is within this context that NAL is here today to commend the federal government for listening to the voices of women, most of whom strongly support the gun control measures it is delivering to make Canada safer from gun violence. As you've heard, today's announcement comes on the eve of the 35th anniversary of the École Polytechnique massacre. This tragic anniversary reminds us of the central and devastating role that guns often play when it comes to violence against women. In just 20 minutes, the lives of 14 women were stolen, and 10 women and 4 men were seriously injured by one man with a legal assault weapon who hated women. The epidemic of intimate partner violence in Canada demands strong leadership from our government to address this crisis. Today, we're seeing that leadership in action. Still, work remains to be done, and time is of the essence. We hope to see fast and decisive action to bring the domestic violence provisions of Bill C-21 into force, because every day that passes, women's lives are put at risk. Survivors and advocates have worked tirelessly to push for these measures, and we are relieved and grateful to see movement by the government on this important issue for the lives and safety of women and children. We now call on all party leaders, Prime Minister Trudeau, Mr. Poilievre, Mr. Singh, Mr. Blanchette, and Ms. May, to commit to safeguarding these life-saving measures to ensure the safety of women today and tomorrow. Mon nom est Suzanne Zacour, je suis la directrice des affaires juridiques pour l'Association nationale Femmes et Droits, ou ANFD, un organisme à l'avant-garde de la défense des droits des femmes au Canada depuis 50 ans. L'an passé, l'ANFD a fondé la coalition Femmes contre les violences armées pour lutter pour des mesures fortes dans le projet de loi C-21 pour protéger les femmes de la violence conjugale armée. Il y a une épidémie de violences faites aux femmes au Canada. On sait que la présence d'armes à feu est un important facteur de risque dans les situations de violence conjugale, en particulier pour les femmes qui vivent en milieu rural. C'est dans ce contexte que l'ANFD félicite le gouvernement fédéral d'avoir écouté les voix des femmes, dont la plupart soutiennent fermement les mesures de contrôle des armes à feu qu'il propose pour rendre le Canada plus sûr face à la violence armée. L'annonce d'aujourd'hui survient à la veille du 35e anniversaire du massacre de l'École Polytechnique. Cet anniversaire tragique nous rappelle le rôle central et dévastateur que jouent souvent les armes à feu dans la violence contre les femmes. En seulement 20 minutes, la vie de 14 femmes a été volée et 14 autres personnes ont été gravement blessées par un homme avec une arme d'assaut légale qui détestait les femmes. L'épidémie de violence conjugale au Canada exige un leadership fort de la part de notre gouvernement. Aujourd'hui, nous voyons ce leadership à l'œuvre. Il reste encore du travail à accomplir, que nous espérons rapide, sachant que chaque jour qui passe avant l'entrée en vigueur de ces mesures met la sécurité des femmes à risque. Nous sommes heureuses de voir du progrès sur cet important dossier et nous invitons tous les chefs de parti à s'engager à préserver ces mesures afin de garantir la sécurité des femmes d'aujourd'hui et de demain. Merci.
Merci, Suzanne. Thank you very much. I see you, Christina, in the crowd. Thank you for being here today. Merci, Christina, du Bloc québécois, d'être avec nous. Parce que pour moi, aujourd'hui, c'est une journée importante, mais c'est une journée qui conclut 35 ans de travail. Et en fait, elle ne le conclut pas, hein, c'est juste un autre grand pas en avant, une autre grande avancée. Et dans cette histoire, on en a eu plusieurs, mais on a eu aussi des reculs. Donc, vous savez, pour moi, aujourd'hui, c'est extrêmement émouvant. Today of all day was the last when I went to bed 35 years ago with all my innocence. I lost it 35 years ago. At 5 o'clock p.m., I was in a descent, and after that, 30 minutes after, it was done. I have lost my naivete. It takes a long, long way to come back and stand up before you today. And one of my own strategy to stand up is to work for everyone, for myself, for the memory of my colleagues, of my classmates, for my school, for my profession, but for all Canadians also. And that fight on gun control is mainly a fight for a better security for all Canadians. And I really, really, really want it to be heard by all of you. Maybe fighting for gun control seems a very narrow issue, but it has a very big impact on us, and it's a symbol. For us, it was a way to conquer, to go back to control of our lives. And we were able to build Polytechnic after the massacre, after the femicide, should I say. And we have to name it for what it was. It was a femicide. We were shot. My colleagues were killed. I was wounded because I was a woman studying in engineering. So I will not repeat what Susan said, but we have to complete as quickly as possible everything that can be done regarding gender-based violence. And before I move further away, I just want to take a moment with you to repeat the names of my classmates. They are among us today. Their memory is among us. But their families also are among us, because they were the first to begin that fight, along with my classmate Heidi Radjen. We were there. We were with the family in January 1990 when we requested for a ban, a complete and comprehensive ban on assault-style weapon. And today is another step forward, that ban. And I really, really appreciate the leadership and the will that was taken in the last months to have a real buyback program that will be efficient for all Canadians. So please, and you may realize I moved today, but I want to tell you the names of my classmates. Geneviève Bergeron, Hélène Colgan, Nathalie Croteau, Barbara Daigneault, Anne-Marie Edward, Maude Aviernick, Maryse Lagagnère, Maryse Leclerc, Anne-Marie Edward, Barbara Kluznik, Vidayevich, Sonia Pelletier, Michel Richard, Annie Saint-Arnaud, et Annie Turcotte. Ce ne sont pas que des noms. Ce sont des femmes avec des rêves. Ce sont des frères, des pères, des mères, des familles, des époux. C'est une communauté qui est tombée. Et aujourd'hui, c'est notre communauté qui se relève. Un autre pas en avant. La violence faite aux femmes est un enjeu extrêmement complexe. Donc, merci de continuer sans relâche et on va vous surveiller, vous le savez, Monsieur Leblanc, Monsieur Duclos, tout le monde ici savent qu'on est têtus et que non nous aide à être têtus. On va continuer à travailler avec vous pour s'assurer que toutes les mesures qui regardent une meilleure sécurité des femmes vont être implantées. Et le plus vite vous pourrez le faire, le mieux ce sera, parce que vous le savez, on est inquiet. Vous n'avez pas tout le contrôle sur le Parlement et on est très inquiet que le gouvernement libéral tombe. Mais tout ce qu'on pourra faire pour faire avancer au mieux et au plus vite, tout ce qui touche la violence faite aux femmes, on le fera. Je sais que parmi vous, il y a des gens qui vont dire « Ah, 325, c'est seulement 325 new weapons that are prohibited today. » But for us, it is a progress. Because what remains is not a lot of number. We have a promise today in front of you on the eve of the 35th anniversary that what's remaining will be banned. And I want to believe it. Many of you know that it was not clear for me that I would be there today and smiling. I know I'm crying, but I'm also smiling because it's an important step forward. And I really believe that what remains to be done will be done. Donc, 325, 324 types d'armes aujourd'hui qui sont bannis, pour moi, c'est important. Ce qui reste est probablement ce qui est le moins nombreux entre les mains des Canadiens, le moins nombreux entre les mains des marchands d'armes. Et donc, la possibilité, et en fait, il y a un signal aussi qui est envoyé à tous ceux qui veulent absolument avoir ce type d'armes-là. Il y a un signal qui est envoyé, le gouvernement est en action. Et donc, même s'il n'est pas encore parfait, moi, je pense que c'est good enough. L'ennemi, le mieux est l'ennemi du bien. Aujourd'hui, on avance et c'est pour ça que je suis profondément émue. Et l'autre chose importante, moi, ça me bouleverse. Les armes qu'on va prendre aujourd'hui, c'est des armes qui peuvent être utilisées pour faire la guerre. Réalisez-vous ça? C'est pas banal. C'est pas banal ce qu'on apprend. Nous, on le sentait. Moi, je savais dans mon corps que c'était grave. Mais aujourd'hui, ce qu'on apprend, c'est que ce sont des armes militaires. We are learning today that in that list of weapons, there are weapons that will be recognized for war in Ukraine. I knew in my flesh and because of my wounds that those are just killing weapons, war weapons, military weapons. So I'm so proud that today we're doing something. You realize that I could be there for the last hours or so. I want to thank you all. Rachel, thank you. Monsieur Duclos, Monsieur Leblanc, Pam, Wendy, since the beginning. The RCMP, we need you. You are the experts. You know, and you have to to express your leadership. We need you. Thank you for all your work. The women's movement is strategic in the reason why I'm here today, still able to stand up. And merci. Christina, je suis très heureuse de te voir là. Parce que, pour Poly se souvient, mais pour les étudiants de Polytechnique, je vous le rappelle, on a commencé en janvier 1990. Et c'est pas toujours les mêmes qui ont été nos meilleurs alliés. Donc aujourd'hui, avoir les gens qui sont ici, derrière nous, c'est fort important. Et je veux rappeler à tous les Canadiens, peu importe leur allégeance politique, la sécurité de nos enfants, la sécurité de nos rues, la sécurité des femmes, la sécurité des gens différents, c'est l'enjeu central pour lequel on se bat aujourd'hui. Moi, je me bats pour notre sécurité, pas contre personne. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Vous êtes des femmes inspirantes. Nous allons maintenant prendre les questions des journalistes. Madame la modératrice.
Merci. Hi, everyone. We'll take one question, one follow-up. We'll start in the room, then we'll move online, and we'll start in French with Mylène Crête, La Presse.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Leblanc. Qu'est-ce que vous pouvez nous dire des 150 armes qui ne font pas partie là, de l'interdiction?
C'est une très bonne question. Aujourd'hui, les 324 qui s'ajoutent à la liste d'armes prohibées, comme j'ai dit, notre travail n'est pas fini. Je suis heureux d'engager le gouvernement à compléter ce travail. Évidemment, avant que le programme de rachat commence, et Jean-Yves pourra en ajouter, mais ce sera impensable qu'on débute le programme de rachat chez les particuliers, chez les particuliers qui ont ces fusils-là, avant de compléter le travail et de regarder, c'est la GRC qui fera ce travail-là, des experts techniques de la GRC, le sous-commissaire Larkin est avec vous, il pourra ajouter des détails. Eux autres ont un panel d'experts qui vont leur appuyer dans ce travail. Alors, nous n'avons pas fini le travail, c'est un bon pas d'avant, mais il nous reste encore à terminer ce processus-là et ce sera fait au plus tard au mois de février, début février, avant que le programme de rachat commence à envoyer de l'argent aux gens qui vont retourner ces armes prohibées.
Donc, si je comprends bien, la GRC va examiner, par exemple, les modèles qui avaient été controversés, là, comme la SKS.
Exactement. C'est le travail qu'ils vont faire au cours des prochaines semaines. Et par le mois de février, nous aurons complété le travail. On va avoir une deuxième liste qui va terminer le processus avant le programme de rachat chez les particuliers, comme j'ai dit.
Kate McKenna, CBC.
Good afternoon. For Minister LeBlanc, since the ban has been announced, how many firearms have actually been collected and destroyed, and what exactly is the date that Phase 1 is going to start?
So perhaps Deputy Commissioner Larkin can add the details, and Jean-Yves is there, Duclos as well. His department has been really leading the buyback portion. Phase 1, as you know, is to collect from the inventory of gun stores, of gun dealers. These are guns that they lawfully purchased for sale before they were prohibited. So the government will, I expect in the coming days, literally in the coming days, I hope by next week, all of these gun stores will receive information on how they can register online in terms of what inventory they have. And then those guns will be collected and they'll be compensated. But Jean-Yves or Deputy Commissioner Larkin, I've seen photos of the first guns that have been destroyed as part of a pilot project, as Jean-Yves said, with 4 businesses. This was to test the IT, the website. Those tests, I'm told, have gone well. So every other business that has these firearms in their inventory in the coming days, and not weeks, but days, will be eligible to begin to return them for compensation. But perhaps Deputy Commissioner Larkin could add something?
I'll add very little to what Dominic has just said. He has summarized really well what we have done for the phase of collection of firearms from businesses. So a pilot has been running since the beginning of November. The pilot had a couple of objectives. First was to obviously test the technology that we needed to collect and share the information needed on those firearms. The second objective was to test the ability of the contracting company to actually go on site, collect the firearms, transport them in the appropriate place, and eventually destroy those firearms. a couple of dozen firearms were collected and processed in that particular manner. And today we are able to announce the official launch of Phase 1, the phase of collection from merchants, from shops, as Dominique just said a moment ago.
For my follow-up, it's for Madame Prévost. I'm just wondering, it's been 4.5 years since this buyback program was announced. We're heading into an election year. The ministers aren't able to give a date for when even Phase 1 is going to start. How optimistic are you that Phase 1 and Phase 2 will be in place by the next election?
The fact that the pilot program had begun is a good step forward. The fact that we are gathered here today with a much more completed list, and that we are promised in front of all of you on this day that the list of prohibited weapons will be completed, gives me hope. And you understand that on that issue, my role is to keep my faith high. If I lose hope right now, who will fight for it? So we won't stop.
Journal de Montréal.
Oui, bonjour. Écoutez, je voulais savoir, la période d'amnistie va finir vers la fin de 2025. Il y a plus de 14 000 armes qui devraient être retournées au gouvernement, si je comprends bien. C'est quoi le plan? Est-ce qu'il y a un plan en place si jamais les gens ne redonnent pas leurs armes à la date après l'amnistie?
En passant, la phase 1 a commencé. So Phase 1 has started. No, just in Phase 1, we call Phase 1 the phase of collecting firearms from shops. And as I said, it started as a pilot in the last few weeks, and it is now officially announced that, as Dominique said, shops will be informed of the way in which they can and should participate in that Phase 1 program. Donc, sur la question de l'amnistie, je sais connu depuis un bon bout de temps qu'en octobre, il sera interdit, il sera illégal de posséder ces armes à feu, et c'est par conséquent pourquoi nous allons de l'avant présentement. Nous croyons que nous avons le temps, au cours des prochaines semaines et des prochains mois, de mettre en place non seulement la phase 2 auprès des particuliers, mais évidemment, comme on l'annonce aujourd'hui, la phase 1. Donc on va de l'avant pour s'assurer que d'ici à octobre 2025, tout soit là pour que les gens qui ont acquis ces armes de manière tout à fait légitime et tout à fait légale, puissent être compensés.
Si je peux peut-être ajouter qu'est-ce que Jean-Yves a dit, nous avons beaucoup de confiance dans ces personnes qui veulent respecter la loi criminelle du Canada. Ces personnes ont acheté ces armes à feu légalement. Les armes sont maintenant illégales. Alors, et on a un programme évidemment pour les compenser. Ils vont retourner ces armes-là avec l'aide. La police va s'organiser des points de collection. Ce sera entre les mains des policiers de s'organiser la façon de les récupérer et les détruire. Et ces gens-là vont être récompensés. Ils pourront aller acheter une arme de chasse qui sera légale. Alors, nous avons beaucoup de confiance et les gens ne veulent pas se trouver une situation d'être en violation du code criminel.
Merci pour la réponse. Je ne sais pas s'il y a un plan pour ceux qui ne vont pas redonner leurs armes. Mais une autre question, en fait, je crois comprendre que vous avez donné la permission à Post Canada d'entreposer et de transporter les armes. Je voulais savoir si ça va changer ou si ça, c'est toujours en vigueur, parce qu'en ce moment, ça ne se passe pas super bien là, avec Post Canada.
Il y a effectivement la permission et l'opération. Pour l'instant, Post Canada n'est évidemment pas sollicité. On n'a pas eu besoin de Post Canada non plus depuis le début novembre, alors que Post Canada n'était pas en grève pour faire le travail de la phase 1. Mais comme vous l'avez dit, il sera possible au cours de la prochaine année pour Post Canada d'être en appui si c'est souhaité et souhaitable.
Stéphanie Levitz, Globe and Mail.
Hi there. None of us have seen the list of newly banned guns, and it doesn't appear to have circulated yet. Can somebody please give us an indication of which specific makes and models are now banned, and why, for example, as I understand from my colleague Mylène, the SKS is not among them right now?
Thank you so much. And so the list will be circulated very shortly and will be on. There's 324 makes and models, and so it would not be effective. But thank you for the question. What I can tell you is that the Canadian Firearms Program, that has a number of subject matter experts, worked extensively over the last year to look at about 559 makes and models. Based on those makes and models, we applied the May 2020 original Ordering Council definition, and so we've actually gone through that, and that again highlights the large capacity magazines, the paramilitary style, easily converted to a tactical assault rifle, as well as rapid fire semi-automatic. And so we've processed to date 324 firearms. 185 of those were already restricted, and so the recommendation based on the May 2020 OIC was to move them to prohibited. And then we've been able to look at 139 other firearms that we believe, based on that definition, we've made a recommendation based on our subject matter experts in partnership with Public Safety Canada to our minister, Minister LeBlanc. And subsequently, we have 230 firearms that are outstanding. And as mentioned, we will continue, the Canadian Firearms Program will continue that work in partnership with a subject matter expert panel to provide further recommendations to public safety and eventually to the Minister of Public Safety. And so 144 firearm families, and again, approximately 14,521 have been identified across our country. Those are restricted firearms. We anticipate in the range of 6,000 non-restricted firearms within Canada. So for a total of just approximately 20,000 firearms. So more work to be done, more analysis. We have working on a timeline, and we hope to have a recommendation in early 2025 to public safety and eventually to the minister. Thank you.
Thanks. Just as a follow-up, I think directly to you, is what does that leave in terms of non-restricted firearms now, then, for people to access, ones that you don't think will ever be restricted based on the criteria you're applying? Folks will say, well, hunting rifles are going to be banned now and all of these things. And what does the legal firearm landscape in Canada now look like, statistically or otherwise?
Bear with me. So thank you for the question. And, as you're aware, there's about 2.3 million individuals that hold a valid firearms license in our country. And that equates to just over 1.1 million registered restricted firearms in our country. 162,359 are currently registered as prohibited, and which will be part of the larger buyback program. But there's a significant number. New firearms continue to come into our Canadian market. And even in the current list that we've made a recommendation to the minister, which has come into effect today, about 500 guns, new guns have come into that market, have been added to the original list. And so, again, the market continues to be there. It's difficult to predict because we don't actually have a visibility on all the non-restricted firearms that are in our country. And so it's very difficult for us to estimate the numbers that are accessible that are there. We're very much focused on, obviously, the historical, the 2020 OIC definition and threshold. And of course, now moving forward, we apply the C21 Evergreen definition. And as Minister Duclos and Minister LeBlanc alluded to, every firearm coming into the country now will be registered and managed through the firearms reference table. So hopefully that provides some insight. We're happy to give you more information offline and after this. Thank you.
Mark Renzi, Toronto Star.
Thank you. Minister LeBlanc, you've previously put in measures to tackle the illegal smuggling of guns across the border, but police and experts say that remains probably the biggest way that perpetrator of gun violence. So why isn't the focus more on that? Why aren't you proposing more new measures on that issue?
So that is also an area of focus. We absolutely share the concern that organized criminal groups smuggle illegal firearms across the Canadian border. The Canadian Border Services Agency seizes thousands of these firearms in the run of a year. Happy to get you those details of the seizures that CBSA does, and the RCMP also in their work around transnational crime and organized crime does a lot of good work here. And perhaps the Deputy Commissioner, Brian Larkin, could add something, but we're doing both. We're focusing on the border as a source of smuggling of illegal guns. We're going to have more to say, as you know, about strengthening certain postures at the border in the coming weeks. But there already is a real focus on illegal guns crossing the border, the RCMP and CBSA. But the good news is we're going to give them additional resources around border security and additional technologies. So I think we can continue to do both of these efforts. It's not an either or choice. Keeping Canadian communities safe involves the measures we announced today, previous measures, additional measures we're going to announce in the coming weeks, but absolutely a focus on the illegal arrival of guns into Canada. So I'm confident we're going to do both in a very effective way.
And we're now dealing with an incoming U.S. presidential administration that seems to care a lot about our border and has raised concerns with us about our border. Have you, when you met President-elect Donald Trump, raised the issue of guns coming illegally from the U.S. border? Did you raise that with him, or are you planning to raise that with him, as he seems very comfortable raising issues about our border with us?
So when the Prime Minister and I were at Mar-a-Lago 6 days ago, I guess, last week, the Prime Minister absolutely raised our concern around the arrival of illegal firearms across the Canada-U.S. border. We spoke to the President about that as an example of how we share the American concern around border security and border integrity. So we will continue to talk. There'll be follow-up conversations. The RCMP works with the FBI and alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. But as I said, we're going to be working with the RCMP and CBSA to increase their resources and their personnel. And I have every confidence that they'll continue to focus on this challenge as well with our American partners.
Davis Legree, iPolitics.
Thanks, Valerie, and thanks for taking our questions. I just have one quick one. I'm not sure if it's better directed to Mr. LeBlanc or Mr. Blair, if you're still over there. Just wondering if there's a preliminary estimate on how many guns potentially collected during the buyback program could be sent to Ukraine, how many they should be expecting to receive.
Thanks for the question. First of all, Ukraine we gave them the list of all the weapons that we had prohibited. They've indicated a number of them that were unique, that they believed they could use. We have not been able to determine a precise number because there's an inquiry now taking place with those retailers, and it's their choice. They get to choose whether or not they wish to either participate in the gun buyback program that Mr. LeBlanc has announced today, or wish to instead make them available through the Department of National Defense to Ukraine. They'll be compensated equally, but we'll know better the numbers when the retailers advise us, and that process is underway now, and the software is in place to enable retailers to tell us precisely what weapons they have in their possession. We'll then compare it against the list that the Ukraine has provided us with, and we'll be able to determine from that how many weapons we'll be able to supply to Ukraine. Thanks.
Nuju, Canadian Press.
Hi. I just want to confirm that all the prohibited guns, those banned in 2020, those banned now, and any future assault style guns are going to be part of the buyback program.
Perhaps, Valérie, I can take that. Of course they will be. Where the buyback program, as Jean-Yves indicated, with respect to retailers, is underway. The remaining program will come out in the next few months. But all of these guns that we have prohibited, of course, will be subject to the buyback program. These people bought these firearms lawfully. They're law-abiding gun owners, and to comply with the law now, they'll be able to return these guns and be compensated for their value.
Thank you. And on the expert panel that you're convening, can you talk a little bit more about that, about what the roadmap ahead for them is when it comes to advice on firearms still on the market right now?
Sure, I can perhaps offer a few comments, and maybe Deputy Commissioner Larkin can add. The RCMP, when we talk to them about undertaking this work, we have a lot of confidence in the judgment and the expertise of the RCMP. I think Canadians do. I was glad that Madame Provost recognized the support that they can bring to this exercise. But we thought, and they thought, it would be useful to have access to a group of technical experts to support their work. This group has met a number of times over the last few weeks. It includes academics. It includes technical experts. There's an Indigenous person who will be participating. Some of them have asked that their names be kept discreet, but perhaps Deputy Commissioner Larkin could add something.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. And so very supportive of the expert panel. The Canadian Firearms Program, which is a regulatory licensing and does have an investigative component, has been working diligently in partnership with Public Safety Canada. We looked at approximately 559 originally since over the last year, and now obviously we're currently announced the 324, which leaves about 230 firearms to continue the analysis. These ones we believe that we would benefit from external guidance to help our subject matter experts look at historical weapons, look at different processes through that to give us also that external lens. We do this every single day. We have a responsibility to ensure compliance with the Canadian Firearms Act, however, believe that this would be a really good use of subject matter experts, including also bringing various lenses, including an Indigenous lens, as we look at the potential impact on society. And so we believe that this is a measured, appropriate response to support the excellent team at the Canadian Firearms Program, which the RCMP has oversight of. So, thank you.
Et pour terminer, je vais me permettre moi-même une question. Valérie Gamache de Radio-Canada, on a beaucoup parlé de la SKS qui a été utilisée quand même dans des tueries là, au Canada. Là, je pense à ces 2 policiers en 2022 en Ontario. Est-ce que ce sont des pressions qui font en sorte que ça ne se retrouve pas sur cette liste aujourd'hui? Des pressions, par exemple, de chasseurs ou de communautés autochtones. Pourquoi ne pas aller de l'avant tout de suite?
Valérie, si vous me permettez, je vais essayer de répondre, et si le sous-commissaire Larkin veut ajouter quelque chose. Vous avez raison, c'est une arme qui a été utilisée à plusieurs tragédies dans des tueries importantes, massives qu'on a vues. Je me suis engagé, j'ai aucune hésitation à m'engager que la décision sera lors de la prochaine liste. Vous avez raison, c'est un peu compliqué dans le sens, il y a plusieurs chasseurs, que ce soit Inuits ou autochtones, qui ont cette arme-là. Alors, nous sommes sensibles à ça. On veut réfléchir au cours des prochaines semaines. Le sous-commissaire Larkin a fait référence aux experts qui vont travailler avec la GRC, y compris des représentants autochtones, mais à un moment donné, il faut trancher et on va trouver la façon responsable de le faire lors de la prochaine liste au plus tard au mois de février, avant le programme de rachat, la phase 2 chez les particuliers.
Et Mme Provost en parlait, il y a quand même un risque que le gouvernement tombe. Est-ce qu'il ne faudrait pas aller plus rapidement avec le programme de rachat si on est sérieux dans la démarche de réellement vouloir faire en sorte que cette loi ait du mordant et donne quelque chose?
Valérie, on veut procéder d'une façon responsable, dans le sens où on veut que le programme soit bien construit, qu'il n'y a pas de difficultés techniques, que les éléments de sécurité soient en place. On a fait référence autrefois à Post Canada. Alors, Jean-Yves a prêté main forte à mettre ensemble les éléments du programme de rachat. Son ministère et Jean-Yves ont fait un travail extraordinaire en appuyant le ministère de la Sécurité publique. On a travaillé ensemble. Jean-Yves peut peut-être ajouter des détails en termes de délai, mais on comprend l'urgence. Moi, j'accepte l'urgence d'agir. On va procéder le plus vite possible et j'imagine que des gens qui ont ces armes à feu-là déjà depuis plusieurs années vont avoir hâte de recevoir l'argent pour leur permettre de les remplacer avec un fusil qui est maintenant légal. Mais Jean-Yves, tu peux peut-être ajouter quelque chose?
Oui, deux choses à ce que tu viens de dire. Ce que tu viens de dire, c'est qu'effectivement, il faut le faire de façon efficace et responsable. Et le rôle de la GRC là-dedans est évidemment crucial. Deux autres choses que j'ajouterais. La première, c'est effectivement un exercice qui va prendre plusieurs mois. Mais cet exercice, ce n'est pas tout. On va continuer de devoir défendre nos communautés au cours des prochains mois et des prochaines années. Et comme on y a fait allusion brièvement tout à l'heure, il faut que les autres partis en Chambre s'engagent, peu importe qui est le gouvernement dans quelques mois, dans 1 an, dans 2 ans ou dans 3 ans, à ne pas revenir en arrière. Tous les gains que nous faisons présentement et qu'on a fait au cours des dernières années seraient annulés si un prochain gouvernement, peu importe quand il arrive, détruisait tout ça. Il nous ramenait des années et des décennies en arrière. C'est une question que les Canadiens et les Québécois ont le droit de poser aux autres partis à la Chambre des communes. Et la deuxième chose que j'ajouterais, c'est que ce travail, au cours des prochaines semaines et des prochains mois, est un travail en partenariat avec les provinces et les territoires. Les provinces et les territoires ont juridiction en matière de sécurité publique, en matière de force policière, des juridictions qui sont fondamentalement importantes pour le succès de la phase 2 auprès des particuliers. La phase 1, on peut y arriver assez facilement et assez rapidement tout seul au gouvernement canadien, mais pour la phase 2, il va nous falloir la collaboration des provinces et des territoires. Il est à nouveau totalement légitime que les Canadiens, y compris les Québécois et les autres Canadiens, demandent aux provinces et aux territoires, une très bonne relation jusqu'à maintenant, mais demandent à quel point on peut continuer à travailler ensemble de manière collaborative et efficace pour mettre en place ce programme de manière à nouveau efficace et rapide au cours des prochains mois.
Merci beaucoup. Merci à tous. C'est ce qui conclut cette conférence de presse. Merci d'avoir pris le temps de répondre longuement à nos questions. Au revoir, M. Leblanc.
Bye Valérie, merci beaucoup. Au revoir.